Hello and welcome to this virtual session. We're glad you can join us today. Before we get started, there's a few housekeeping items we'd like to go over with you now. Firstly, you can resize the webinar windows to cater to your viewing preferences. You can maximise, minimise and drag the windows to your preferred viewing size. If you look at the bottom middle of your screen, you can click on the widgets that you'll need to get the most out of this virtual experience. Secondly, Microsoft specialists are on hand to answer your questions in real time. So feel free to type in your questions using the Q&A window and we'll answer them as soon as we can. Lastly, we've provided some additional resources for you to supplement your learning. You can access them by clicking on the links in this section. Without further ado, I'll hand over to our speakers.
Hello everyone and welcome to Microsoft Virtual Training Days. My name is Monique O'Reilly. I'm a Microsoft Technical Trainer and I will be taking you through the material over the 2 sessions for Microsoft Dynamics 365 Fundamentals Enterprise Resource Planning course. We have a lot to cover across the finance and operations apps within Dynamics 365, or you might know these by another name, being Enterprise Resource Planning Apps or ERP apps for short. But rest assured, we will cover the full course and you'll be pleased to know that the content ties directly to the MB-920 exam. So everything we cover has corresponding materials available in the Microsoft Learn path at aka.ms/MB920. With these sessions and using the Microsoft Learn path, you'll be well on your way to earning that MB920 badge. Now to give you a rundown of how the content is going to split across the 2 sessions. Today, we will be starting off in this part with an introduction to finance and operations apps and a brief overview of integrated reporting options. Then we will be taking a look at the finance module and also the supply chain management module within Dynamics 365. And in the second lesson, we will be looking at the other modules on commerce, human resources and project operations. We have a full agenda, so let's get started with module 1. We find at Microsoft what often causes customers to seek out Dynamics 365 for its ERP capabilities typically boils down to about 3 reasons. The first reason is that they are experiencing issues with a lack of capacity with their existing ERP system. And what we mean by lack of capacity is that as a business grows, they need a system that is able to accommodate those extra staff, the new lines of business, and extra business processes. A lot of ERP systems cannot handle this, particularly legacy systems. And this is why they turn to Dynamics 365 as a cloud-based solution that is extremely scalable and able to grow with them. The second reason for a shift to Dynamics 365 is that their current system has a lack of insights. So it's super common for organisations to have all these legacy systems on the go. They have one that handles one department and another system handling another, and it means that all the different departments are actually working in silos almost. And it may not be a big deal for individuals, employees working there in each department, but imagine being a decision maker trying to decide strategy, and you need data from all these different systems, and to get that into a format that you can get meaningful insights from. It's a huge challenge and a lot of work. The advantage of Dynamics 365 is having everything in the one place. Built-in data analytics and business intelligence makes decision-making that much easier. Finally, organisations can find that their existing ERP system is costly to operate, which leads them to evaluate other options, and Dynamics 365 can be just what they're looking for. I think now would be a great time to go and take a look through these features and do a walkthrough. So let's do that. So I've just logged into Dynamics 365, and what I really want to do here is show you a bit about the interface, show you how you can find things, and so you have a bit of an idea of how everything fits together. So to start with, you will have your company's name or organization's name in the top left-hand corner here. And you'll see it's Contonzo Entertainment System USA. You'll also see in the top right something called legal entity. So I can go here and I can choose what legal entity I want to work in. And I'm just going to leave it as USMF for now. We also have a hamburger menu up here in the top left, which I can expand out. And under modules, I have all the different modules and they're listed alphabetically. So it's quite easy to find what I'm looking for. We also have tiles in the middle here, and what tiles you see will be dictated slightly by what role is assigned to you in the system. We also have a calendar on the left and work items that are assigned to me that I can click on to go action. I'll also get you to direct your eyes to the top right. We have notifications here with the little bell. We have settings where we can adjust the layout and things like that. And we also have a help button. So if you find you really need some help, you want to look at some documentation, you can enter your query in this search box and you should be able to find an article that can help. Now let's say I want to go and find the vendors page. I can go in this search box up the top and type in all vendors. And it gives me a few different options. And I'm looking for procurement and sourcing vendors. So here is the master data of my vendors. Okay. I can choose to do things like filter. So if I click on this column here, I can filter and I want to find a particular vendor. And I can click on the number to open it up and see the details. So that's just showing you a little bit about the system and what you can do in here. I hope that was useful. Let's get back to the class. I hope you enjoyed the demo. This takes us to our second lesson for this Module 1, where we'll be focusing on the reporting with finance and operations apps in Dynamics 365. We have a few different reporting options, and the first one I want to talk about is SQL Server Reporting Services reports, and they're often referred to as SSRS reports for short. These are pre-generated reports that you're able to print to screen, a printer, a file, or even to an email. And you're not only limited to the out-of-the-box reports, you also have the ability to create custom reports that suit your organisation's needs. You can also set these up to run on a schedule using a batch job, which is very convenient. Now I'll briefly describe how you can go about using these. You will need to use Microsoft Visual Studio firstly, and you also need to have a finance and operations apps development environment. From there, you can go create your report object and then assign a data set to the report. The data set is defining the data that the report uses. We also have the data source, which determines how the system retrieves the data from the data source. The 4 data source types are listed on the slide here. So we have query, business logic, report data provider, and AX, a num provider. So query means that you can use an existing application object tree query, which is great if you want to quickly generate reports and limit the amount of code you have to write. Business logic is for when you want to run reports from a data source other than the finance and operations apps. Report data provider is your go-to if you want to really apply that advanced logic. And finally, AX, a num provider, is for when the report parameter is an enumeration type. A scenario that sometimes comes up is needing to modify an existing report, and this is absolutely possible. In Visual Studio, you would use the extensibility of X++ objects to do things like add new columns to a report. We also have workspaces that you can create, and these are super useful. The way I think of workspaces is as a personalized work center that will have data, reports, and transactions that displays my work really effectively, so I don't have to do 6 or 7 mouse clicks and navigate around my pages to find what I'm looking for all the time. Instead, it's a matter of opening up one page, it's all there. You might see a box saying 4 payment journals not posted, and another saying 1 sales order on hold. And then you would go click on an item to be taken directly to that task. I also want to point out that there is a distinction to be made between analytical workspaces and mobile workspaces. So analytical workspaces are based off a set of reports that offer insights into standard business operations, and they actually look a lot like dashboards. Whereas mobile workspaces, as the name suggests, are designed to be run on mobile devices and can be used with the finance and operation apps, timesheet, expense, and advanced warehouse. So it's important to be aware of these differences. Next up, we have Power BI. And this is such a fantastic tool to leverage to create rich visualizations of your data. And the great part about this is that Power BI can be embedded directly into those analytical workspaces we just covered. So you're able to see infographics and visuals within Dynamics 365 itself. Another option is you can start with using Power BI Desktop, use the Dynamics 365 connector to have all that data pulled into Power BI Desktop app. From there, you can choose to transform the data using the built-in Power Query Editor, which is within the Power BI Desktop app itself, and help shape and prepare the data ready to be modelled and be in visualizations. Then, when you're happy with the visualizations, you can choose to publish them to Power BI service as a report. From there, you're able to apply filters to the report and the visuals within it. Or you might like to add those visuals to a dashboard. So at a glance, you're able to see in real-time insights into what's happening in your organisation. And also, you can share these reports and dashboards with people inside and outside your organisation too. Now, I want to talk about some of the options you have when it comes to exporting Dynamics data into Excel. And this is key because a lot of finance professionals spend so much time working in Excel, so it would be more natural for them to work in Excel with data where they're comfortable. So Dynamics 365 uses an application called Excel Data Connector that allows you to view, update, and edit data within an Excel workbook. And in order to use this app, you have to make sure you download the Microsoft Dynamics Office add-in. It's also extremely helpful when it comes to working with data entities inside of Excel. And if you're not familiar with data entities, they're really just objects inside of the data model. For example, I might have a vendor entity that has a total of 17 tables and data sources that have been combined into a single entity. So when you open that data entity inside of Excel, it's really easy to view and edit all of that data in the spreadsheet. I think it would be a great idea to just show you how it works in action. So let's do a walkthrough now. Okay, so I've just logged into Dynamics 365 and I can see in the top right hand corner, I'm in the legal entity I want to be in, which is USMF. And what I'm going to do in here now is show you how the Excel integration works and also show you the Dynamics Office add-in app in action. So the data I want to work with is actually within vendor groups. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to get there. Going to the hamburger menu, expanding out these modules, and finding procurement and sourcing. Here it is. I'm going to go to setup, which is already expanded, and here is vendor groups within vendors. And these are some existing vendor groups I have, and I want to work with them in Excel. So how I do this is I go to this little button up here, open in Microsoft Office, and I'm going to select vendor groups under open in Excel. And download and open file. So I'll just close out of that. I'm going to select enable editing, and here is this add-in from Dynamics loading up, and see how it's pulled across the data from Dynamics into Excel. And what I'm going to do here is add another record. So I'm just going to add it underneath. Okay. And when I'm happy with it, I can go click publish, which will send that data back over to Dynamics. Let's see if it's been successful. It said publish successful. So let's go check. I'm going to minimize, and it's not showing here yet, but I might refresh the page and see if it appears. Here it is, 100 insurance vendor. So you can see how it's pulled across that data, that new record I just created, and that's been successful. I hope that demo provided some extra context, and the good news is there are many more integration capabilities with Dynamics 365 across other Microsoft services. And this in itself is such a huge benefit of using Dynamics 365 as an ERP system. The fact that it can seamlessly integrate with all these other Microsoft tools means you have so many choices open to you. At the top, we have Microsoft Power Platform, and I've seen this in practice so much where Power Automate is used to automate workflows in Dynamics 365. We also have Microsoft SharePoint integration, which means it can be utilised as a location for document management. Microsoft Office integration is also great in terms of being able to export to Microsoft Word for lightweight reporting, as an example. Lastly, we have email integration as a possibility as well. So once it's been configured and set up, you can send an email directly from Dynamics 365. Now, this brings us to the end of Module 1. We have already covered so much. Next up, we'll be sinking our teeth into the Finance app within Dynamics 365. But before we do, I think it would be a great idea to take a break. Take 10 minutes to rest your eyes, and I'll see you back here shortly. Welcome back. Let's take a look at our second module of Dynamics 365, where we will be covering the basics of the finance app. And before we start looking at the content, I just want to preface this learning by saying that if you don't have a finance background, there is no need to be concerned. Even though we are discussing finance concepts, we're only discussing them at a very high level, just enough to assist you with deciding what tool can help you with which task. And that's all you need to know for the exam too. But if you already do work in this field, this might actually pique your interest in parts, and you might use this as a jumping off point to do more classes down the road covering Dynamics 365 Finance. So let's begin by looking at the core capabilities within the Finance module of Dynamics 365. If we look at the slide, we can see how many features there are within this Finance app. And across all these features, it's multi-currency, it's multi-company, and offers the ability to monitor the performance of a company on a real-time basis. And my purpose here is not to explain these features to you just yet, but to give you a little taste of what's to come in the rest of the module and give you a high-level idea of what this finance app is actually all about. We're really focusing on covering off important concepts in this first lesson now. So let's take a look at legal entities. So in the first phase of implementation, so right at the beginning of you implementing Dynamics 365, you have to set up a legal entity. And to be clear, a legal entity is only to be set up for companies. And that company must be registered or have a legislated legal structure. So if my business were to be called Contonzo Fashion, then I would have a legal entity for Contonzo Fashion. And the country or region that I select for its primary address would ultimately influence what features I see in Dynamics 365. If the country I select is Australia, I will see the features that are applicable to Australia. This is because regulatory requirements vary between different countries and regions. So a field that's required for regulatory reasons in financial reports in Australia may not be required in New Zealand, for example. Ultimately, these legal entities are there to enter into legal contracts, and there are a requirement in terms of preparing statements and reports. Now, if you direct your eyes to the right of the slide, we also have registration IDs. And this is a country or region specific identifier that is approved for use in a country or region for tax, customs, and other purposes. Now, the requirements for registration ID differ between different countries and regions. The great thing is that if you review the Microsoft documentation, you can see information specific to different countries and some guidance around that. For example, if I was operating my company within Europe, the VAT ID would be used and I'd be adding that to the registration ID field. Now, another key area is taxes and how to handle taxes in Dynamics 365. And the tricky thing here is that while we're all most likely familiar with taxes in our day-to-day lives, the rules vary per region and country. Fortunately, Dynamics 365 is really good at accommodating these scenarios, and we're given a few different ways we can handle taxes in the system. We can see these outlined on the slide. We have sales tax groups, item sales tax groups, and sales tax reporting. So let's have a chat about each one. Firstly, sales tax groups are for when you want to group tax codes that are attached to customers and vendors. Now, the reason this is so useful is customers and vendors aren't always going to be located in the same country or region. They'll often be foreign, and as a result, they'll have different tax codes apply when you trade goods or services with them. So being able to group the tax codes and apply it to certain customers and vendors is pretty handy. Then we have item sales tax groups, which are groups of sales tax codes that are attached to resources like products, and the sales tax codes of the assigned group apply when the item is sold. One thing I want you to take in and really remember is that for every transaction where sales tax needs to be calculated and posted, it must have both a sales tax group and an item sales tax group selected. And finally, sales tax reporting codes are a little different. This is talking about a field number on a sales tax report, and these codes will differ based on location too. Again, I'll mention that the Microsoft documentation has country-specific guidance around this too. Now on to cost accounting concepts. And this is a slide where it really starts to feel a lot like an accounting class. But don't worry, we're very briefly covering cost accounting concepts, only dipping our toes in the water, not going for a full swim in the ocean. So cost accounting refers to looking at a company's total cost of production, breaking down the steps of production and looking at the associated variable costs at each of these steps. And we can see in the screenshot in the slide that the budgeted amount doesn't always equal the actual cost. So that's another key part of cost accounting too, looking into that difference. Now they are the concepts, and the relevance here is that there is a feature in Dynamics 365 Finance to help management of this, which is the cost control page. What's great about this is that users are able to drill into the details behind the balances shown in the workspace, which is very useful. Another important aspect of the finance module is its capabilities around journals. Now, if you're not familiar with them, journals contain detailed information regarding business transactions, and these business transactions are referred to as journal entries. So that's pretty straightforward, right? You have a journal and it has journal entries, which are essentially business transactions. And typically, a business will have many journals. They might have one named invoice register, where it registers basic information about vendor invoices, and that's mentioned under the accounts payable heading in the slide here. You might have another journal named the project expense journal for recording project expense transactions. And what you will note with these two examples is that you're recording these transactions that correspond to the journal name. So each journal name is set up and configured for a specific purpose. And that's one of the first things you do when you do journaling in the finance module. You set up the name. From there are quite a few different elements you can configure, including workflow approval, which allows you to set up rules based on certain criteria, like if a debit exceeds a certain amount, it will need to be routed to this approver. And if it exceeds an even higher amount, it will need to go to these other approvers. And these are conditional approval capabilities ultimately that I'm referring to. There's also default values, and these are useful for allowing you to be able to actually set the default values for offset accounts, currency and financial dimensions. Another element is journal control, where you can set up restrictions for the company and account type, and also the segment values too. So that's a wrap for lesson 1, where we have covered quite a few different concepts. Now let's take a look at the second lesson, where we are looking at the chart of accounts. And this can be a little challenging if this is the first time you're coming across these concepts. So pay close attention. If you think back to the start of this module, we spoke about legal entities and how a company can be set up as a legal entity. And if you were to acquire another company, you would have 2 legal entities, one for each company. Now to add on to that, for each of the legal entities, there is one general ledger, and this can be linked to one chart of accounts. So to recap, we have the legal entity, which is the company. It'll have one ledger, and each ledger can be linked to one chart of accounts. So if you're new to these finance concepts, you might be thinking, what's the relationship between a general ledger and a chart of accounts? So I'll unpack that for you. A general ledger is the record of debit and credit entries for a legal entity. The chart of accounts, on the other hand, is an index of every general ledger that exists within your organisation. So you can imagine if you have multiple legal entities within your organisation that each has a general ledger, and then you will have multiple general ledger accounts that will be listed in your chart of accounts. So there is ultimately no issue having this one chart of accounts being used for more than one legal entity. Another thing to be aware of is financial dimensions, and these are data classifiers that are used for reporting in financial reports, and they're identifying information like purpose, cost centre, department, things like that. So to reiterate, these are super important for reporting purposes. And there's 2 types of financial dimensions. We have custom dimensions and entity-backed dimensions. So custom dimensions are where you, as the user, define what the financial dimension is. Entity-backed financial dimensions, on the other hand, are where you're selecting a system-defined entity to base the financial dimension on. Then to add on to that, we also have financial dimension sets, which allow you to create a combination of the main account and financial dimensions. And when we talk about the main account, it's an account in the general ledger that is used to record financial transactions. Balances or totals that can relate to assets, liabilities, expenses, and owner equity. It might be best if I just show you how the main account works. And I'm going to log into Dynamics 365 now and do a little walkthrough and show you how to create one. Okay, so now I'm going to walk you through how to create a main account. First things first, check we're in the right legal entity, which we are. And now let's go to the general ledger. I'm going to expand the hamburger menu, go to general ledger, and I'm going to go to chart of accounts, expand that out, expand out accounts, and click on main accounts. And I'll see a list here of existing main accounts, but what I want to do now is, of course, create a new one. So let's click on new up the top here, and it's going to get me to fill in this information. And the good thing, I'm just showing you here that when you hover your cursor over a box, it gives you a little description about what that field's about, which is pretty handy. So I'm going to enter into the information now. Note that it will get me to select an account type, and I'm going to select expense. Also have an account category. And we also have a debit or credit default, and I'm going to leave that as debit. So it's all quite straightforward. That's all you need to do. When you're happy, you go click save up the top and you're done. Now what I want to do is take a look at the periodic financial process. So each organisation has a different process and different steps they need to do at the end of a financial period. And you can actually see some of the different steps that an organisation might need to take on the slide here. The good thing about the Dynamics 365 Financial Period Close workspace is that it allows you to track all of your different financial closing processes across the different companies, the different areas, and the people's responsibilities. And depending on the view of the Financial Period Close workspace, you can either see all the tasks and all the statuses for a specific closing schedule, or just the tasks that are assigned to you. You can also choose to filter either by company or the person who's responsible for that task. You can choose something that's due today or things that are due in the past. It's really simple and fully customizable, so it can be based off your organisation's closing process. And on that note, that's a wrap on lesson 2. Let's move on to lesson 3, diving into the features around accounts receivable firstly, and then we will look at accounts payable. So starting with accounts receivable, what it is basically money owed to a business by its debtors. So for example, let's say I'm an electricity company and I bill my customers for electricity. After the customer has already received it, they're going to get an invoice from me, and it's going to be a record on my accounts receivable until the customer pays it. So that's an extremely high level explanation of accounts receivable. And there is actually quite a bit involved, as any accounts receivable team will tell you. Broadly, they have 5 main jobs. They first need to process any customer prepayments. So think of this as like deposits. And then after the prepayments, they're going to have to send an invoice to the customer for any remaining balances. Once the customer pays, they're going to enter the payment into the system, and then they're settling all the different invoices and payments made. If it's all paid off, they'll close out the line. However, if there's balances due or even past due, they're going to work on collecting that payment from the customer. So the finance module is very efficient in terms of helping with these processes. Firstly, when it comes to sending those invoices to customers, you can create them based off existing sales orders or packing slips, which makes things very quick. You can receive payments using different payment types, whether it's electronic payments, credit card, cash or check. Also, if your organisation has multiple legal entities, you can use centralised payments to record payments in a single legal entity on behalf of the other legal entities. Another feature that's mentioned on the slide there is free text invoices. And these are invoices for items that do not require a sales order, packing slip and customer invoice. You might create one of these for a consulting fee or a miscellaneous fee. So that's worth noting too, that your invoices don't necessarily have to relate to what's in your sales order or inventory. And what I'll do now is show you how you can go about creating one of these free text invoices in the system. Okay, so let's dive into creating this free text invoice. First things first, we check our legal entity at the top, USMF, that's good. And we're going to navigate to accounts receivable. So I'm going to expand this out, accounts receivable, go to invoices and select all free text invoices. Now from here, we have some in the list and we're going to go create a new one. So I click on new up the top. And the first thing I need to do is enter the customer account. So I'm going to enter that in here. And I'm going to pull that up. So that customer's already in the system and it pulls through all their information into this free text invoice header, which is great. Got the address, we have their name. So it's very useful and saves a lot of that administrative work. Now, we need to add to the invoice lines now. And I need to put a main account to start with as well. So here, what I'm going to do is just expand that out and I'm going to type it in. The one I'm looking for is promotional expense. Here it is. And as soon as I selected that, look what's happened. It's populated sales tax group and also item sales tax. So that's good. I can change the quantity by just typing directly into the box. I can put in a unit price. And then another cool feature I'll show you is I can go look in this accounting tab up here. I can go look at the view distributions page. Just load up. So that lets me see how everything is accounted for, which is great. Once I'm finished, I can close out of it. And when I'm happy, I can just go post this now by clicking post in the top ribbon. It gives me some options here and I'm going to click OK. And it's complete. We're all done. So that's how straightforward it is to post a free text invoice. So I hope you enjoyed taking a look at the accounts receivable functionality in Dynamics 365. Now let's look at the other side of the table where we have accounts payable. And accounts payable is money that's owed by a business to a supplier. And it's going to be shown as a liability on the company's balance sheet or as a short-term debt. So for example, let's say we are a restaurant and we want to order a delivery of raw ingredients, meat, vegetables, and such. First, we would submit a purchase order to the supplier, which is like an agreement to buy the food. The supplier will deliver the food to us without having received any payment at this stage. And then the supplier will issue an invoice, which will typically have payment terms like 30 days as an example. Now, how Dynamics 365 helps with this is when it comes to receiving that vendor invoice, it can be received electronically through a data entity or manually entered into the system. There is vendor invoice policies and workflows to automate the review process so that invoices that meet certain criteria are automatically approved, and remaining invoices are flagged for review by an authorised user. Also, if it so happens that there is a bit of a trend happening where the purchase order figures are not matching up with the supplier invoices, or if the receipt of goods isn't matching the purchase order, you can implement something known as three-way matching policies to help with enforcing matching between the purchase order, the receipt of goods, and supplier invoices. But ultimately, there is a lot to unpack in this area, and this is a fundamentals level class. We can't go too deep. So let's move right along and take a look at some specific scenarios that can arise with vendor payments and settlements. And the specific scenario I'm thinking of is where organisations make a prepayment or advance payment to a vendor for goods or services before they're fulfilled or delivered. And in these situations, there are two methods to issue these. The first is to use prepayment invoicing, and the second is prepayment journal vouchers. And to help minimise risk, you can track the prepayments by defining the prepayment on the purchase order. But once it's time to settle the invoice or pay it off, you can either choose to do it as a partial payment or a full payment. And this is all going to be based on the terms of your contract with your vendor. But the good thing here is that it's all supported by Dynamics 365 Finance, making life a lot easier for your accounts payable team. Now, let's talk about the capabilities around credit management and collections management in the Finance app. And this is super important because what this is ultimately all about is managing risk. You don't want to be extending these huge lines of credit to customers and later discovering that they don't have the ability to pay their bills. So you can do a number of things like assign risk scores to customers, set up a workflow to manage the approval of credit limit changes, and create blocking rules that put an order on hold due to a factor like having an amount overdue. Now, if we take a look at this from the collections standpoint, all collections information for a customer is on one page, and you can take action from that page. So you can organise it so that collections agents can have their own customer pools. You can choose to write off transactions or waive fees from here too. So overall, there's plenty of features in here to help you manage both risk in terms of credit management and then also features to streamline the collections process too. Now we're up to our fourth and final lesson for this finance module, taking a look into expense management, fixed asset management and budgeting. And we're going to lead with talking about cash and bank management concepts first. And what I want to get across to you here is how Dynamics 365 can help you manage your organisation's bank accounts. And this is done through the cash and bank management module. You can do things like manage the legal entity's bank accounts, as well as all the financial instruments that are associated with those bank accounts. And there are four main processes under cash and bank management. Firstly, you have depositing bank funds, and this could include things like deposit slips, bills of exchange, promissory notes, or really anything. Then you have your reconciliation of accounts, and this is where you receive a bank statement. Then you have to review each legal entity's bank transactions and compare it with the transactions on the bank statement and ensure they match up. Third, we might have cases where you want to transfer an amount of money from one bank account to another, or maybe you need to manage letters of guarantee. Now, letters of guarantee are where you have an agreement made by a bank called the guarantor. And essentially, you're agreeing to pay a set amount of money to another person who's called the beneficiary. And if the bank's customer, which we call the principal, if they default on a payment or an obligation to the beneficiary, you're still safe. Now, if that happens, you may need to process a settlement. And a settlement can occur between any transaction type that affects the vendor balance or the customer balance. And these things can be like transactions, invoices, payments, credit memos, and fees. Really any transaction that can be settled against any other transaction type. Now, that's just the management of your bank accounts. But what about how you can manage your company's expenses? Well, inside of Dynamics 365 Finance, you can use expense management to create a workflow where you can store payment method information, or you can import your credit card transactions. And then you can track the money that employees are spending and where they're incurring any expenses for your company. And if you wanted to, you could define expense policies and automate the reimbursement of things like travel expenses. And one of my absolute favourite things is that the expense report entry has been redesigned to really simplify the whole expense report process, and it makes it simpler. Now, there is another instance. Let's say, for example, you have a worker who is employed by one legal entity and they're still part of your organisation, but they're doing work for another legal entity under that same umbrella. There's something called intercompany expenses, And that's basically where you can assign that employee's expenses to the legal entity for which the work was performed. So no matter what type of expense that you might have to process, the expense management dashboard makes it nice and easy to walk you through that process. Okay, now I do want to move on to the asset management tools inside of Dynamics 365 Finance. But before I can do that, I need to make sure you understand the difference between a fixed asset and a current asset. So in accounting, we hear the term asset, which is basically an item or resource that's owned by an organisation. And it's supposed to provide some type of monetary benefit in the future. Fixed assets are owned by the company with a goal of a productive use by the company rather than resale. So we're expecting them to provide some sort of economic benefit for more than one accounting year, and they're kind of designed to help the business operations. Now, if you were to take a look at a balance sheet, the fixed assets are reported as their net book value, which is what the purchase price is, minus any type of depreciation. Think of fixed assets as being things like buildings, land, machinery, computers, furniture, copyright patents, and so on. Then on the other hand, we have current assets, which are the items that you're trying to sell or trying to consume within 1 year. So this is usually within the company's normal operating cycle, and these are the things that are required for being traded. That's their overall purpose. So these are things like investments, inventory, short-term loans, cash, or really anything that's a cash equivalent. And inside of Dynamics 365, you're going to have what we call the Fixed Asset Management Workspace. And this workspace shows all the information that's related to the fixed assets that are entered into the system. And you'll have a summary view and an analytics view too. And with all this information, you're going to be able to see information about any of the assets related to the company you're currently filtered under. Now, the final thing I want to cover in this module is budgeting capabilities in Dynamics 365 Finance. Now, when it comes to budgeting, it can be a pretty complex topic. I mean, there are a number of different methodologies, and Dynamics can support these, which is great. So, for example, when we have a look at different budgeting methods, you could take a zero-based budget approach. And this is actually, I would say, probably one of the most common approaches. How it works is that it starts with the assumption that all department budgets are at zero and must be rebuilt from scratch. And so your managers must be able to justify every single expense. So nothing's going to be automatically okayed. Zero-based budgeting is ultimately very tight. And the goal here is to avoid any and all expenditures that are not considered absolutely essential or vital for your company's success. Another budgeting strategy is known as historical budgeting. And this is where you're taking the actual figures from a time period, and then you're either adding or subtracting a percentage to get this year's budget, or whatever current year's budget you're working on. But ultimately, it doesn't matter what methodology you use to create your budget. Dynamics 365 Finance budget module can help you out. You can use things like basic budgeting to define the financial dimensions for budgets. You can create budget models. You can set up and use budget register entries. You can also set up optional budgeting workflows to automate the review of the budget register entries, including things like budget transfer. So let's say, for example, if an approval is required for transferring a budget amount from one department to another, the workflow functionality can help you automatically create an approval workflow. And you can also set up budget control that can help manage some of those different financial resources through the chart of accounts, the workflows, the user groups, and also the different documents and journals. And after you have everything set up, you can plan, measure, manage, and forecast all of your financial resources throughout the rest of the fiscal year. But like I said, budgeting is an extremely complex topic, so I'll leave it at that. Now this brings us to the end of Module 2, and ultimately our exploration of finance in Dynamics 365. And I want to really remind you all that if you don't come from that finance background, and if you found a lot of the concepts new, don't stress. You need to know the concepts at a high level only, just enough to know which tool to use in Dynamics 365. And on that note, let's go for a quick break. How about we take 10 minutes and I'll see you back here soon. Welcome back from the break. I hope that you were able to stand up and at least have a stretch. I know with these virtual training days, it can be hard to sit in front of a screen for long periods of time. But this is our final module for today's session, so I'll ask you to hang in there and keep your focus because we have one huge module coming up. So let's go ahead and get into the content. And we're going to be looking at supply chain management. So what is supply chain management? Well, let's start by breaking down the first part. What is a supply chain? A supply chain refers to the sequence of processes involved in the production and the distribution of a product or service. If we think back to that fashion business I described earlier in the modules, there are many steps before we walk into the shop and pick a shirt or a pair of shorts off the rack to buy. At the very beginning, the materials to produce the clothes need to be procured and transported to the right factory where they will be assembled. Then they need to be shipped to the right warehouse and timeframes need to be tracked and considered here too, and many steps after this as well. So these steps need to be managed. There needs to be careful planning, control and execution where the supply chain is concerned for everything to run smoothly and for there to be also successful outcomes for a business. This is where Dynamics 365 supply chain management tools are so helpful in terms of helping you manage this process effectively. If we look at the slide, we can see a total of 12 boxes, each referring to a different feature within the supply chain management tool. We will be covering these features in the rest of the module, starting with product information management feature. Now, this is an important feature, and you might even say it's the backbone of supply chain management, and also the commerce app too. It fulfills the purpose of acting as a centralized location to store product information so it's accessible by all parts of your company. And specifically, it's within the product repository that you're storing all the information about your products that your organisation buys, stores, distributes, manufactures and sells. Now, when you go to add the information about a product, there are a few terms that you need to get across. So firstly, there are two product types, item and service. An item is something you're going to sell or things that are used to manufacture that item. A service, on the other hand, is like an hourly service or basically something that's there to support the process of manufacturing. Now, to add on to that, we can actually have product subtypes too, and there are 3 of them. Firstly, a subtype named product is referring to a uniquely identifiable product. It doesn't vary at all, and for this reason, it doesn't allow you to associate dimensions with this subtype like different colours or sizes. The second subtype, named product master, is what we create to create things called product variants, and product variants also so happen to be our third product subtype. So let me unpack that for you. How it works is that the product master could be a t-shirt, for example. We know what kind of material we want, we know what we want to make it out of, and we know how to make it. But with the product variant, we can make that exact same shirt, but it ranges in different sizes, and we could have it in different colours too. So the product master is like the base plan, and the product variants are different varieties of it. And the great thing in the Dynamics 365 supply chain management tool is that it supports all these different product information categories, and this data can be effectively used in other areas like assigning serial numbers per product variant as an example. Now, that was a lot to take in, and I think it would be great to open up Dynamics 365 and see the product creation process in action. Okay, so I've just logged into Dynamics 365. I can see in the top right, I'm in the legal entity USMF. And what I'm going to do now is navigate to the Product Information Management module. So I'm going to expand out this hamburger menu, and I can see it here. I'm going to expand out the products and select Released Products. And these are the products that are being released to the legal entity USMF. Now, the situation is that there is a new configuration of a cabinet coming out, and I need to create an item for it. So I'm going to click on the New button and enter in its details. So the product type is item. I have a product subtype I can choose as well, and I'm going to leave that as product. I need to enter a tracking dimension group. I'm going to enter none, and it will let me select it here. And I also need to enter identification information like a product number and a product name. So I'll enter that now. Now, if you look on the right here, we have sales taxation and also purchase taxation. And I need to add an item sales tax group for both. So I'm going to enter that in now. And I'm going to add a purchase price of 30 and a sales price of 30 as well. And if I look over to the reference groups here, I can add an item model group. So I'm going to enter first in, first out. I'm going to enter TV and video. And here, I'm after site warehouse. Now that's all looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select OK. It's processing my request. And what I can do here is if I look in the top at the screen, I have product tab and I also have validate. So if I hover my mouse over validate, I'm going to click it and check that all the required fields for validation are specified. And it appears that that's all okay. And that's all I need to do. So now that you have your product set up, there'll be another consideration to keep in mind, and that is related to price. It's likely that you'll have different prices depending on the vendor, customer, or product concerned. For example, if you have a vendor that is buying your products for the purpose of resale, you will likely have something called a trade agreement, where it's decided that there will be a special price on sales and purchase order transactions for that vendor. You can use the trade agreement journal in the supply chain app to create and maintain that agreement, and others like it too. Another potential scenario could be that you have a particular product that you want to clear out of the warehouse because there's a new version that's been released, so you might apply a discount to it. Ultimately, a variety of discounts are supported in Dynamics 365, including line discounts, multi-line discounts, and total discounts, which gives you plenty of options. So, I think we've done well covering off the basics around supply chain in this first lesson. What I want to do now is look at the warehouse and inventory management features and get stuck into this second lesson. Let's get started with costing methods, because your company needs to be able to calculate all the costs that go into creating a product. You have things like labour, the materials for the product, and the surcharges, and really just the cost of doing business. And inside Dynamics 365 Supply Chain Management, there are different cost management tools and cost sheets that can help you calculate the cost of production. So you can include things like material consumption, or you can set up things like cost categories for surcharges, or any other indirect costs that you might incur. We also have 3 different ways that you can calculate the actual cost for your inventory. First, we have what's called first in, first out, or you might hear it called FIFO. And this is where your company is selling the product that they bought in first. Whereas LIFO, or last in, first out, is where you are selling the inventory that you bought in last. And then we have a thing called weighted average, which is basically where you average the cost of the inventory and how much you sell over a period. Now we're on to talking about warehouse management systems, or WMS for short. And before these systems existed, all I can say is it must have been really tough. I can't imagine having to manage all of this manually. Because what these systems are able to do is provide visibility into your inventory, shipping and receiving. On top of this, they integrate with other business processes like transportation, quality control, purchase, transfer, sales and returns. You also have machine learning enhanced guidance around effective inventory management, so you can avoid running out of stock or overstocking for that matter. And we have a few different use cases here on the slide demonstrating that they're useful for inbound, outbound, and quality control scenarios too. Now, when we're talking about warehouse management systems, there are certain terms that you need to be familiar with, and let's start with purchase orders. Let's say I have a little fashion boutique retail store as my business, and winter is coming, and I need to be able to go get a new delivery of next season's clothes. I'll send a purchase order to the supplier listing that I want 10 dresses, 10 pairs of shorts, and 10 pairs of pants. The delivery would arrive sometime after this, and the supplier would issue me an invoice, and I would pay the amount owed in the invoice. So that's the dollar and cent side of things with purchase orders. But in terms of the physical order that's just arrived in the warehouse, I would need to record the receipt of the goods in the arrival overview page of the supply chain management app. The purpose of this is that the warehouse workers can understand what work is expected for this inbound process. Now in this case, there could be a decision to move that order immediately to the correct outbound dock so that it can be shipped to my little boutique shop as quickly as possible. And this is known as cross-docking. It's basically a warehouse process where the required inventory quantity from an order is moved straight from receipt or creation to the correct outbound dock. On that note, I think now would be a great time to take you through how to create a purchase order in Dynamics 365. So let's do that. Okay, so I've just logged into Dynamics 365. I can confirm I'm in the right legal entity that I want. And so I'm going to go and dive in and create this purchase order now. So I'm going to expand out the hamburger menu, and I'm going to navigate to procurement and sourcing, go to purchase orders, expand that out, and click on all purchase orders. You might recall from other demos that I've done that when we want to create something new, we can look in this top ribbon and select the new button. Okay, so here are some fields I need to fill in to start creating my purchase order. So the first one is vendor account. So I'm going to type in the vendor account. Here it is, and I'm going to select it. And you can see that's pulled across the name of the vendor, the address, the delivery site. Lots of information has come across. And if I go down a little bit, we have this general area here. You'll see the system has automatically assigned a purchase order number. You'll see that there's also these sections here, storage dimensions. So we can choose a site. We can also choose a warehouse. And we can also choose a delivery date for when we expect the goods to be delivered. Now, if I scroll down a little bit more, we can see that under this administration area here, that we have an orderer, Julia Funderburg. And that means that she's basically the contact person, the person who's creating this order, so that if there is any issues, the vendor will reach out to her with any questions. So I'm happy with this, and I'm going to click OK. It's sending, and there we go. And you can see what's happened is it's populated the purchase order header. Now I'm looking at purchase order lines. And what I want to do here is I want to show you something pretty interesting. If I go to purchase order line here, and I scroll down, I can select dimensions. So I can choose to display different product dimensions in this view if I want to. So I might select color and click OK. All right, now I'm going to enter the item number for the product. And I'm going to select it. Note that now I can select a color here too. I'm going to select white. I can select a quantity. So I might make that 10. And I can also choose to populate these fields too. Now, if I move down a little bit further, I just want to show you a few more things. You can choose to go to the delivery tab here and also enter the delivery date as well at this point too. So there are plenty of things to do in this space. Now I'm happy with this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click Save. And I'm going to close out of it by clicking the close button in the top right. And what you can see here is our purchase order. So I can see it right here. It's highlighted in blue. And this was the purchase order number ending in 127. And here it is. I can open it back up again. We have some more terms to familiarise ourselves with now. There are inventory reservations, and you might choose to have items reserved for reasons like there being a shortage of items due to a long or unknown delivery time from the vendor, or you want to give certain customers first priority for delivery. There are also picking and packing features. All you need to do here is select the sales order, click the Pick and Pack tab to print the list of items so that they can be selected from the inventory. Another option is cluster picking. Here, a warehouse worker can use a mobile device to assign orders to a cluster. This allows the worker to pick items for multiple orders at the same time. The benefit of this method is that they're only going to the pick location once instead of going back and forward multiple times. Moving on to location directives. And what these do is determine where picked items will be put. So for example, you might have a location directive for putting away incoming items. It's simply referring to where you put the items after they have been picked. Also note that they're going to be created for a specific work order type. For example, a sales order or a return order. Next we have output orders, and these are used to link sales order lines and transfer order lines with the outbound picking process that uses picking lists. And finally, we have replenishment. And there are a number of supported replenishment strategies that are available in the warehouse management tool. For example, wave demand replenishment, load demand replenishment, and it's not necessary to go into a deep dive about these, but I just want to mention them so that you know that these strategies are supported. Now, another feature I'll touch on briefly is the inventory journals. And what this is essentially a ledger or a record of all the inventory changes that have taken place. And depending on the type of transactions that are being tracked, there'll be different types of inventory journals. For example, we can see on the slide here, there is an inventory journal for movement. There is another inventory adjustment journal, and so on and so forth. Now, continuing on with our discussion about inventory, let's talk about inventory counting. And this is exactly as it sounds. We're talking about the physical inventory being counted. And then we enter that inventory counting figure into the inventory counting journal in the supply chain management app. So much like a stock take, really. Then we also have on-hand mobile workspace, which means that in a retail shop, for example, the retail worker could have their tablet, and when it's installed, a customer can come up to them and say, oh, hey, do you have this phone in blue? Or does it come in orange? And you can say, sure, I'll just look it up for you here. And you can find it on the tablet and advise the customer as to what products are in inventory. Now let's talk about quality. And in the manufacturing industry, you're going to be hearing about quality assurance, also known as QA, a lot. It's so important because item quality can really make or break a business. So what organisations have to do is ensure quality is maintained, and they do this with product testing, and when there are issues detected known as non-conforming material, they need a method to deal with those problems. Where the supply chain management app is great is that it has features for managing non-conforming products, like having turnaround times managed, correction tasks, and the system can schedule tasks automatically to basically help correct those problems and prevent them happening in the future. Another feature that I think is pretty good is where you can set up item sampling controls in the warehouse receiving process. So basically a certain percentage of an item, or every 20th or 50th item that is produced, is moved to the quality control location for testing. So that's quality assurance in a nutshell. Now, our final topic for this second lesson is looking at the different features that help you design the layout of your warehouse. And we're not talking about the aesthetic appeal or interior design here. We're talking about designing the physical layout of the warehouse so that workers can easily move things like forklifts and ladders around the warehouse and do so safely. We want to make sure that warehouse workers are able to maximise productivity by having visibility of available space locations, being able to pick the products effectively, and be able to rearrange products easily. So the supply chain management app has some great features to help with this, but you need to begin by inputting some data around the physical location in your warehouse, and you'll enter these in the system as zones. Then you need to explain what can be stored in a particular location, or if there's particular capacity in a certain area. To guide you along the way, there is a location setup wizard, wave templates and work templates, and plenty of other features to help you on your way with this. We have now arrived at the final lesson for this module. You'll be learning all about item tracking and tracing processes, tools that can be used to manage shop floors, master planning, manufacturing strategies, and manufacturing types. Let's begin by looking at the different manufacturing types. Now, we're going to be looking at 3 different types of manufacturing, being discrete manufacturing, process manufacturing, and lean manufacturing. And we'll also be talking about a combination type of manufacturing known as unified manufacturing too. So firstly, we have discrete manufacturing, and we refer to this as the production of distinct items. So consider a couch, a smartphone, or a car. These are the products of discrete manufacturing. The production process would involve a bill of materials and follow a product route like an assembly line. Now, let's compare this to process manufacturing. And this is commonly used in manufacturing of food, beverages, and pharmaceuticals. And the relevant factors here are formulas and bulk materials, as opposed to a bill of materials. If you think the product was likely made according to a recipe or formula and was made in bulk quantities, then it's likely a product of process manufacturing. Then our third type is lean manufacturing, and this is a method that is focused on minimising waste within manufacturing systems, and at the same time, productivity shouldn't be sacrificed while this is taking place. And an interesting thing to note about this is this was actually derived from the Toyota production system. They take great pride in aiming to eliminate waste and achieve the best possible efficiency. The fourth and final type of manufacturing I want to discuss is unified or mixed mode manufacturing. So this is where you combine different manufacturing types and is useful where different products require different manufacturing processes. It's also important to note that the supply chain management app can support this, as well as supporting all your manufacturing strategies. And I'll take you through some manufacturing strategies now. We have make to stock firstly, which is the classic manufacturing principle, where you produce products for stock based on forecast or historical data. Next, we have make to order, and this is where standard products are made to order or finished to order, and the main idea is that the sales order triggers the product to be made. We also have configure to order, which is where the customer is able to choose features or requirements for the product and then have the product assembled accordingly. An example would be ordering a pizza, where you choose which ingredients you would like to be on it, and then the pizza shop makes it. And finally, there is an engineer to order, and we think of this as occurring when a project starts with the engineering phase, and during the engineering phase you design the products required to fill the order. So now let's talk about production. And an interesting thing to note is that despite organisations having different manufacturing processes, a lot of the core production elements are the same. To start the manufacturing process, they're going to need to create a production order. And this is basically a request to start the manufacture of a certain quantity of items that are specific to that order itself, and all the information that is associated with the item that you're going to be producing is inside that production order. And inside of Dynamics 365 Supply Chain Production Control module, it allows your manufacturing facility to customize production orders so that they're streamlined to your specific production requirements. But before we start creating a production order in the system, let's discuss a few of those different elements. The first being resources. This is going to be anything that's used to create, produce, or deliver your goods or services. But this does not include the materials used in the process. So think of this like a machine or a tool. We also have bill of materials, which is the ingredients, the components, the parts, the raw materials, everything that's required to make a single finished product. So the bill of materials is going to define the materials that are needed, and then we have the route, which is going to determine the sequence of events to build the finished products. The last thing we have is operations, and these are going to be the tasks or the work processes that are being put together with a route to basically produce a specific product. On that note, I think it might be easier if I just show you how to create a production order. Okay, so I've just logged into Dynamics 365. I'm now going to create this production order. So I'm going to navigate to Production Control, go to Production Orders, expand that out, and click on All Production Orders. Now you'll see in the ribbon up the top, we've got a button. It says New Production Order. So I'm going to select that, and you'll see that it automatically gives me a number at the top, which is great. Now I'm going to add an item number, and you can search for it, but I already know which one I'm looking for. So I'll just type it in. Here it is. And notice all the information it's pulled across. Now I can update some of this. So I'm thinking of my delivery date. I might set that to being in 1 month's time, roughly. And I can change the quantity. I might make that 20. And you'll notice this BOM number and route number. That's all been pulled from when I selected the item number up the top here. But you can always change these, but that's optional. Once that's good, I'm going to select Create. It's just loading, we're processing your request. And it's done. Here it is. Right at the top. Nice and easy. So let's now talk about item tracking and tracing processes. So this is essentially talking about the fact that we have serial numbers and batch numbers assigned to items so that they can be tracked inside and outside the warehouse. And these serial numbers and batch numbers are also known by the term tracking dimensions, and they're required on every product you set up in Dynamics 365. So this is very helpful in terms of managing your inventory on a very detailed level. Now let's have a look at shop floor management tools. Firstly, we have job cards. And the scenario here is that an employee signs into a device and the device presents their jobs in the scheduled order. They can also review any other jobs they have too. Next, we have product costing feature. And this relates to managing the finer details of component and manufacturing costs, and ensuring that there is a detailed breakdown of all costs and variances, including indirect costs too. Lastly, there is Gantt charts, which is basically a chart showing the amount of work that has been done over certain periods, ultimately helping with providing visibility into operations. Now, I want to tell you a bit about master planning. This is what allows your company to figure out what you have in raw material and what you need to order to meet your company goals. And the way that master planning works is it looks at what materials you currently have on hand and then compares it to what you need to produce your products. And not only that, it's also looking at your inventory, your transactions, your sales, purchasing, production, and all of the transfer orders. And all of that is going to go into the master plan. So your warehouses, the forecasts, calendars, coverage groups, product tables, all these different things are going to impact the master plan inside of the supply chain management module. And this master plan is really going to be focusing on 3 main planning processes. The first one I want to take you through is called forecast planning. And forecast planning is based on calculating gross requirements and future projections, enabling companies to conduct long-term planning of materials and capacity. But before a company elects to use forecast planning, they must determine whether this is feasible for their particular situation and whether they're able to use this planning process with results that are actually relatively accurate. The second planning process I want to discuss is intercompany master planning. This involves calculating net requirements across legal entities. It connects demand and supply between companies, not only for the short-term firm demand and supply, but also for the long-term planned demand and supply. And third, we have master planning. This is where the net requirements are calculated based on actual current orders and enables companies to control inventory replenishment on a short-term, day-to-day basis. Now, to finish this module, I want to briefly touch on the planning optimization add-in for Dynamics 365 Supply Chain Management. What this does is it enables master planning calculations to occur outside of Dynamics 365 and the related SQL database. The benefit of having it separate is that these master planning runs can be very long running, and they're also processing really high volumes of data. Therefore, it makes sense to use this add-in to minimize the server load, and you'll see improved performance and minimal impact on the SQL database. So that wraps up our content for part 1. We have covered a lot. I would say modules 2 and 3, being the finance module and the supply chain management module, are definitely the largest in this course. And the remaining 3 modules on commerce, human resources, and project operations are a lot lighter content-wise. So you will find part 2 of this course a breeze by comparison. But in saying that, if you do feel like brushing up on anything we covered today, remember your go-to place is the Microsoft Learn path at aka.ms/MB-920. You can check out the lab videos there and get hands-on. Also, there's some great videos in there I would recommend checking out too. But that's all I have for you as of now. I will see you back here for part 2 when we cover the rest of the finance and operations apps inside of Dynamics 365. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.